For quite a while now, I've been wanting to do a video making the case that herd immunity strategies absolutely will end the coronavirus pandemic, and no credible person is making the case that they won't. But aggregating all the material for a video like that takes time, and I just hadn't gotten to it yet. But then someone sent me this absolute gem from 538. This article leads with the headline that herd immunity strategies will not save us, but then the body of the article makes precisely the opposite point. I guess 538 thinks it's okay to lie in the headline if the rest of the text is honest. But seriously, this article is exactly what I would have hoped to produce if I'd gotten the time to make my video. The strongest version of the title that I can think of that would be honest to the body of the article but still make their point would be, "A lot of people will have to die to reach herd immunity." The article starts with a long-winded introduction because I think these writers are paid by the word. And by the time we get to paragraph 5, we've completely obliterated the claim that was made in the title and said that herd immunity does work, it's just that a number of variables can affect when we reach it. They then go on to show us their herd immunity simulator, which shouldn't exist if herd immunity is not a thing, and it lets you play with the variables and then click a button and you can see how many people would need to get infected in order to reach herd immunity. I've seen numbers all over the place from various sources on this, ranging from 40 up to 70%. This is the first time I've seen 90% as the claim, but at this point I think it's safe to just say we don't know. And then we have a section on flattening the curve. This is the usual argument about not wanting to get everyone sick at once and overrun the hospitals. Everyone agrees with that. Next, we pivot onto the idea about herd immunity wearing off. It is true that we don't know how quickly your immune response to COVID-19 wears off over time. One thing the authors say here that could be a little bit misleading is the idea that your immunity could fade off while the disease is still active. As long as you're being continually re-exposed to COVID-19, your immune response is going to continue to stay strong. I pulled up a source for that claim, which I'm going to link in the description. But the high-level idea here is that as long as you keep getting exposed to something, your immune response does not go away. In fact, lockdown strategies could actually be working against herd immunity if they keep recovered people away from exposure long enough to let their immune response completely wear off. Okay, so next the author spends a few paragraphs talking about what herd immunity is. I think we all know that at this point. And finally, we get to the author's real objection to the herd immunity strategy, which is that people are going to die. It's completely fair to say that the unavoidable death rate is too high and that it's better to keep society locked down long term while we wait for a vaccine. But be honest about that claim. Herd immunity will work. The argument is that the cost is too high. The next section describes a really interesting concept called Outbreak Overshoot. The idea of outbreak overshoot is if the infection moves through society too quickly, the momentum of the infection will carry it past the threshold of herd immunity and cause it to infect people unnecessarily. Avoiding outbreak overshoot is really an argument for flattening the curve. It is not an argument against herd immunity. The next section of this article gets into the difference between having antibodies for coronavirus and actually being immune to coronavirus. In reality, there are many shades of gray. It's possible to be resistant to coronavirus, but not immune. And likely this is going to vary from one individual to the next. Herd immunity is a population-level concept. It doesn't pivot on the question of whether or not it's possible for a particular member of a community to be reinfected after some specific period of time. Regardless of that, it is interesting to note that there are currently no known cases of anyone ever being reinfected with coronavirus at the time I'm recording this video. Here the article goes back to the point that immunity can wear off over time. They cite an example where people were given a dose of a virus, allowed to get sick and recover, and then given a dose of the same virus a year later and got reinfected. But this ignores the fact that if the participants in that study had been getting exposed to the same cold virus for the entire year, it's very unlikely that they would have been susceptible to it a year later. In fact, people who recovered from the 1957 Asian flu found themselves partially resistant to the Hong Kong flu 11 years later. The paper concludes by repeating its main point twice. To get herd immunity without a vaccine, we have to accept the virus's base mortality rate as a cost. This is a fair point when it's presented honestly. The counterargument is that by pulling together and shielding the vulnerable, healthy people can use their own immune system to protect the unhealthy. We can work together to drive the death toll as low as possible, but we will never be able to completely stop death. Locking down also has costs, and foregone preventative medical care can also lead to death. There are points to be made on both sides of this argument, but media publications must stop using their platforms to misinform the public and hint at the objectively false claim that widespread infection will not end this pandemic.